Tonight, breaking news. MPs in South Korea defy the country's president and try to block a declaration of martial law. Well, the extraordinary move announced by the president accused the main opposition party of sympathising with North Korea and controlling parliament. As clashes took place outside the parliament, politicians inside voted to block the declaration. Well, it's fair to say confusion remains right now, with MPs staying in the National Assembly overnight. It appears they're waiting for martial law to be lifted. The Defence Ministry, though, have said it will remain in place until the President says so. Also tonight, a special report on Reform UK. Our correspondent Serena Barker-Singh has spent months looking into the rise of young men voting for Nigel Farage's party. So what's behind the phenomenon? The party's deputy leader, Richard Tice, will join us live. It's Tuesday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, tonight we are staying with those extraordinary developments in South Korea after the country's president suddenly declared martial law. Well, these live pictures show the main entrance of South Korea's Assembly Hall, which is where the country's parliament sits. The president's been under some extreme political pressure ever since the opposition won the general election. He's now vowing to eliminate what he calls anti-state forces, accusing the opposition of sympathising with North Korea. Well, needless to say, the situation is extremely fluid this evening. Military troops have been trying to enter Parliament. People inside have refused to leave. And under the new emergency laws, all political activity inside or outside that building is now suddenly illegal.
친애하는 국민 여러분.
I hereby declare an emergency martial law in order to defend the Free Republic of Korea from the threat of North Korean communist forces and to eradicate the shameless pro-North, anti-state forces that are depriving our people of their freedom and happiness. This measure is necessary to safeguard our constitutional order of freedom.
Well, of course, South Korea is a key ally of the UK's in that region, and we have had some UK reaction in the last hour. The Minister for the Indo-Pacific, Catherine West, has issued this statement. She said the UK is deeply concerned by the events in South Korea on the 3rd of December. Our embassy in Seoul continues to monitor developments and is in touch with the Korean authorities. We call for a peaceful resolution to the situation in accordance with the law and the Constitution of the Republic of Korea. British nationals in South Korea should continue to monitor and follow the Foreign Office travel advice. Well, what on earth is going on? Here's our International Affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn. It feels like this has taken people by surprise. What is your assessment of what's happening?
Completely out of the blue. And I think, when the Foreign Office there says that they're monitoring developments, I think that's diplomatic code for trying to work out what the hell's going on, which we all are trying to do. So it began with this late-night announcement by President Yoon. He is a lame-duck president after his party lost elections. So he's kind of beleaguered. The majority party in Parliament is the Democratic Party. And he's come under increasing attack, not least because of corruption scandals surrounding him, but also his wife and a number of other aides. So it seems that under that pressure, he took a kind of last resort, rather desperate last-ditch measure, which was to declare martial law. Now, he stressed it up in language about a North Korean anti-state conspiracy, but no one's taken that very seriously. So when he made this announcement, South Koreans, who are fiercely proud of their democracy, many of them kind of made their way to the Parliament building. They surrounded it. They tried to help the MPs go in. There was difficulty. The Speaker of the Parliament apparently had to climb a fence to get in. And the security forces arrived, and there was a standoff between those protesters and the security forces, who we assume believed that they had martial law that they had to impose. But despite that kind of cordon that they place around the Parliament, MPs inside the building, including members of President Yoon's own party, voted to overturn the martial law imposition. Now, in their minds, and certainly in the minds of the opposition leader who came out shortly after that vote, that should have been it, because their reading of the Constitution is that the Parliament has the right to suspend and undo what the President has done. But it seems that various agencies and elements within the state, particularly the Ministry of Defence, so crucially the Ministry of Defence that controls security forces, believes that it's down to the President to respond to what Parliament's done. So it's not just the Parliament has to overturn what he's done, but has to respond to that. And therefore they're saying they will maintain martial law until he does so. So we have a mixture of sort of chaos, what looks like an attempted coup by a lame-duck president, and what looks like a looming constitutional crisis as well.
I mean, the chaos is the word, isn't it? You talked there about the particular domestic circumstances in South Korea, but this is such an important ally for the UK, also for the US, of course, in the region. How concerned do you think people will be when they look at what's going on?
Well, deeply concerned because, you know, it's a very important regional ally. It's been since the 80s when martial law was last imposed there, a real sort of beacon for democratic stability. It's a very powerful country economically. It's got a reputation amongst Asians for being a kind of brash, capitalist, consumerist upstart. It's a vibrant, dynamic society and culture, and its politics equally vibrant and democratic. But despite all that, it is regarded as sort of very stable. And obviously to the north, North Korea is very much the opposite, a totalitarian state, fully controlled by the Kim family. And actually, you know, a eccentric, authoritarian conduct by a solitary leader is what you kind of associate with North Korean leaders, not with a South Korean leader, except this is what President Yoon had done. So I think the concern is for those outside of South Korea, obviously concern for the nationals there, what seems to be a situation that could become fairly unstable. I think a lot depends on what happens in the morning. If President Yoon does respond and obviously suspends what he's done, then the crisis is effectively over. We'll have to see what happens to him. But if he doesn't, then you've got a situation of uncertainty. At the moment, although it looks pretty lively, the police are moving in. It seems stable, but it is volatile. And in that situation, the wrong move by the wrong group of people, by protesters, could lead to violence. And I think that is the big concern. So the British government responding to it, but also the State Department. Didn't have much to say about it. Gave the impression in the State Department briefing about half an hour or so ago that they were also scrambling to work out what's going on. But they do say they're watching the situation there with grave concern as events unfold unpredictably in what is a very important ally for the West.
Yeah, it does feel like everyone's playing catch-up a bit, doesn't it? Dominic, thank you very much indeed. Dominic Waghorn there with his analysis for us. And, of course, as Dominic was saying, a very volatile situation. We're going to be keeping you fully up to date with what is going on in Seoul. Joining us now is the former Asia and Pacific Minister, Heather Wheeler. It's great to have you on the programme. Thank you very much for being here. What's your assessment of what we're seeing?
I'd almost use the phrase unprecedented. It's a bit of a shock, and clearly they really are scrambling to find out what's going on. As everybody has said already, the president now is a lame duck president, so whether he has got information that nobody else seems to have and he's using this as an excuse, I'm afraid time will tell. So we'll see what happens in the next few hours.
Yeah, in the next few hours, exactly. It does feel just very unpredictable and a very volatile situation. It's important to underline, isn't it, what an important ally South Korea is for the UK and the West in general, but it feels like most other governments have been taken completely by surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it is an incredibly vibrant democracy. When you go and visit and you've got the main street with little squares off it, all the time those little squares are being used for democratic purposes. People are using their democratic right to have a table and some flags and to discuss whatever the issue of the day is. So this is, it's great that the Constitution allows the Parliament to sit to overturn the idea of martial law being imposed. And again, it was incredible that Parliament managed to get back there and to have that vote. So we all watch and wait.
There's obviously some very particular domestic triggers for what's happened with the lame duck president that everyone's been talking about. But there is a kind of wider context to this as well, isn't there? And I'm thinking, I guess, in particular of North Korea's involvement in what's happening in Ukraine and Russia.
Yes, I mean, that is very worrying that Putin has managed to inveigle North Korea to come and help him out, because patently, obviously, he was losing thousands and thousands of men in the war. You know, North Korea are emboldened by that. But as soon as the body bags start being sent back, I'm sure people will have another view.
Do you think, does that, I guess, make the role of South Korea and the stability of the government there even more important?
It does, but they're a very strong region. And so I'm sure the brothers in arms around the area will be hoping and working behind the scenes to calm everything down, because having a united front against North Korea is absolutely vital.
We've obviously just been hearing from the UK government, who've been saying that they're trying to find out exactly what's going on. The Minister for the Indo-Pacific, Catherine West, saying that they are concerned by the events. They're trying to monitor developments. What do you think is going to be happening behind the scenes in the Foreign Office? I mean, you'll know better than most.
I've been trying to think what the time is, 7 o'clock here. So normally, well, for starters, obviously, FCDO is 24 hours, but you'll have a shift in the department that would always anyway work till 8 p.m. So you've got the top people there working till 8 p.m. and then the 24-hour shift comes in after that. So there will be very high-powered people. The number one or the number two person on the South Korean desk will be in, and they will be liaising with the ambassador and the economic secretary, military attaches, what have you, over in South Korea. And so that line of communication will be open. One thing I think I would absolutely say is for British nationals to stay at home. Please do not go out on the streets. Please do not get involved in this. Just stay at home and keep listening to Sky News, all our other news feeds.
We've been discussing the reaction of the UK government. We have just heard from the German Foreign Office. They've just posted on X to say, we are following developments in South Korea closely and with great concern. Democracy must prevail. So that's the latest from the German Foreign Office, saying that they're following developments in South Korea closely and with great concern. Democracy must prevail. Heather, it feels quite interesting that they're talking about democracy prevailing. Is this the lens that you think people will be looking at this through?
Yes, I mean, there's two things going on here. First of all, whether the president knows something that we don't know, and there has been some sort of insurgence by North Korean special people, whether they're spies or state actors or whatever, or it just looks like this is the last throw of the dice for a lame duck president. But the Constitution is quite clear. Parliament can overturn that martial law by vote. They have done that. So at the moment, what we're looking at from the live feed is crowd control rather than army getting in there and the army taking over the parliament. As long as that doesn't happen, then democracy should be alive and well in South Korea. That's what we hope for.
And what's your own experience of South Korea when you were working as the former Minister for Asia and the Pacific?
Unbelievably outward-looking, incredibly strong economy, really vibrant, really wanted to work with the UK. One of the things that South Korea is really well known for is production of chips for computers and what have you, lots of electronic equipment, also big boats, making massive, great big ships for around the world. So it's a hugely economic, strong area, and one is a true friend to the UK.
Thank you very much for coming on this evening. We really appreciate your expertise. Heather Wheeler there, the former Minister for Asia and the Pacific. Well, as we've been saying on the programme this evening, a very volatile situation in South Korea. The UK government say they're looking on with deep concern. The German Foreign Office posting on X to say that they're following developments in South Korea closely. Democracy must prevail. We'll, of course, keep you updated with any developments from South Korea throughout the hour. But I did just want to return for a moment to domestic politics and talk about Reform UK, which of course made a decisive breakthrough in the general election, winning 5 MPs and 14% of the vote. And it did so not just by winning votes among older voters, but also by winning the support of a pretty sizable number of younger men. And research since has shown a growing appeal for the party from teenage boys, who of course will be eligible to vote next time. So what's going on? Our political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh has this special report.
I've lost quite a few friends over this, but in turn I've gained 40,000 Twitter followers.
People do think that reform is just for older people, and it's not. Big, brash and broy. Reform UK had the most online engagement of any party this election.
TikTok was the place where I saw them, that's where they sort of made a name for themselves, especially Nigel.
And who was watching? Well, mostly young men.
Young blokes want to be young blokes, and they feel the world is telling them not to be young blokes.
They were twice as likely to have voted Reform than young women, moving away from traditional groupings.
The Conservative Party are completely directed towards boomers.
Forming a fresh crop of voters with big political ambitions.
I would like to be Prime Minister waving, yeah, I'd love that.
Who could be the future of this political movement.
Hey TikTok, my name is Nick. I'm a first-time Gen Z voter and I'm supporting Reform UK.
Nick became a political influencer after his first TikTok supporting Reform went viral overnight.
I made my TikTok the Sunday prior, and then next Sunday I was meeting Nigel Farage. I was absolutely starstruck. Hey guys, look again. The conference. They're short, they're snappy. I'm really energetic in them, and I just come across like I'm having a fun time. I think people like that.
It is young people, but it's also young boys, young men.
Yes.
What do you think it is about Reform that attracts that demographic?
I think with the onset of fourth wave feminism and all of that, I for one believe that young men are feeling increasingly disenfranchised by society, and quite frankly, I think Reform offers an exciting alternative because Reform does not discriminate.
Something remarkable is happening with Gen Z.
Data from the general election shows a growing gulf between how young men and women are voting. The so-called bro vote is on the rise, with young men twice as likely to have voted Reform in the election than young women. And for 16 to 17-year-olds, 35% of young men said they would have voted Reform, making Farage's party as popular with this demographic as Labour.
Hello, my name is George Finch. I'm 18 years old.
George Finch started a reform-focused magazine online. So energised by his TikTok success during the election, he says it's by reformers for reformers.
All of us have got that one common goal, and it's to get Reform to win. And our articles are highlighting inaccuracies, bad policy from Labour and Conservative. To say that women are put off by Reform, that's wrong. Women aren't put off by Reform. Women vote for Reform.
Young women?
But sorry?
Young women?
Yeah, young women vote for Reform. They do.
You want as many voters to vote for you as possible?
Yeah.
So if you see it skewed so heavily in one way, surely you want to make sure as many people
Well,
are
I'm sure
voting.
there's, if you see this as a significant issue for Reform, I'm sure HQ are solving this.
HQ say they have all the momentum in British politics. But in the election, not only were less than 20% of Reform candidates women, these 5 men were elected to Parliament. More controversially, this year Nigel Farage told Sky News that the self-proclaimed misogynist influencer Andrew Tate was an important voice for men. Tate has been banned from YouTube for breaching hate speech rules and on Facebook for being a dangerous individual. He was also accused of rape, people trafficking and organised crime, though he denies these allegations. His controversial views have helped to grow an audience of millions online. This is Charlie. He spent the summer campaigning for Reform UK on a battle bus with Nigel Farage.
We stand here united!
But 3 months later, now at just 13 years old, he's moved further to the right, attending and speaking at Tommy Robinson rallies.
I mean, I've got an opinion on immigration and stuff like that. Obviously, you stop the votes and all that kind of stuff.
Do you think from the summer to now you've spent more time online?
Yes, and I believe me being online has helped me actually develop my views. Because if I, say for example, if I were to just watch a normal TV, I would say, oh, what a racist person he is, what a racist person they are. But no, now I'm on Twitter, I see it all firsthand. I mean, we had the wonderful Urban Scoop covering the protests and the riots and stuff, and we actually got to see it firsthand what was actually really going on and the anger and the frustration people had. So I think me being on social media has really developed my views. I mean, I believe just, you know, people that hold the same views as me, they'll always comment on my posts and say, yeah, I agree with that, and I believe that's a major thing, as if that I'm not alone, you know, with these opinions.
Kind of spurs you on?
Yeah, exactly.
Does it make you feel reassured?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to be shouting with a megaphone about my opinions if no one's listening. I believe people, you know, taking in these views, it helps, yeah. And
increasing numbers do seem to be listening. an anti-establishment rhetoric now filling a political gap that mainstream politics won't. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News.
Right, let's speak to the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, shall we? That's Richard Tice. Good to have you on the programme today. I remember interviewing you during the election where you spoke about young men in particular coming over to reform, backing reform, and that is borne out in the data that we've just been hearing about. What do you think it is that appeals specifically about reform?
I think actually it's about personality, it's about conviction, it's about principle. We've got a clear view on some stuff and we tell it as it is. And I think a lot of people, they like that. They appreciate the fact and we're not waffly and wishy-washy about this stuff. We've got a view whether you like it or not. And we noticed it just in the run-up to the election. We spoke about it there. What's extraordinary is the growing sense of momentum. And when I'm stopped on the street or whatever by young people, it's so much more now than 4 or 5 months ago.
You talk about telling it like it is, the views that you're forthright on. What kind of views? Like what kind of thing?
A big thing actually is the trans debate. Our view is quite clear. There's 2 sexes, 2 genders, and that's it. And I think young men actually appreciate that. I think our views on immigration, we've got a clear view on net zero and a clear view that all of these things impact on the quality of people's lives and people leaving school, whether they go to university or not, they're looking around and say, wow, this doesn't look so good for me, folks. And whether it's housing costs, rental costs, the ability to get healthcare, all of these things. They look at the cost of university, they look at the interest on student interest and student loans, and just nothing really looks great. And I was at a university just 3 weeks ago, and a 20-year-old, really bright guy, he said, should I stay or should I go? And that I thought was deeply depressing. And I was actually very sad. I said, I can understand why you asked the question, but the fact you have to ask it is a disaster for this country.
You talked there about some of the kind of universal concerns of young people, housing, university and so on. But the thing that has struck me as well is the gender gap, right? So you are, as you say, doing very well, polling very well, specifically around young men. But only 6% of women aged between 18 and 24 say they're likely to vote for you. That's half the number compared to young men. So what do you think it is about your party that isn't appealing to young women?
Well, whatever it is, clearly we've got more work to do. And in a sense, I'm not gender specific. I just focus on, we just want to appeal to as many people as possible with clear views.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because if you want to, genuinely, if you want to overtake the Conservative Party, you kind of need to
Are you saying, have I got the answer today? Look, this is all happening very quickly, very new. We're talking about weeks and months. There's a sense of momentum everywhere, which is great. And of course, we're going to keep learning, keep improving.
Do you have any theories on why it is, though?
Not yet, but...
Are you looking into it? You're trying to...
Of course, we just got to keep appealing to as many people as possible because we are, believe it or not, I mean, the extraordinary, we're becoming mainstream. You've now got 3 political parties polling in the 20s. We're give or take 21, 22%, Labour a couple ahead, Tories a couple ahead of that. It's all within the margin of error. And it's extraordinary. It's never happened before, I don't think, in my lifetime that I can think of. And so a lot is going on and there is a real sense of shift at a time when at all different age groups, people are feeling poorer financially and the quality of life.
You're ambitious, obviously, as a party. Do you think it is... and I'm kind of genuinely interested. Do you think it's a problem that there is this disparity between men and women, young men and young women, on their politics?
Well,
it does feel quite it feels quite unusual, right?
No, I don't really. I mean, everybody's different, and that's great. Don't try and sort of divide and conquer. We just got to keep pushing on, and we'll appeal to some people, not to others. And so, no, I don't think it's a problem. I think where there's groups that we're not appealing to, I want to appeal to everybody.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting stuff. So you were talking there about, kind of growing as a party, and you have seen some defections, of course. Tim Montgomery today. Another one
Which is really significant. Tim Montgomery is a huge, huge defection. Lifelong, very influential Conservative coming over to us and very significantly impacted by the absolute betrayal from the immigration statistics released last week, where the ONS got their numbers wrong by a mere 250,000, give or take. And that's really significant.
Another defector, of course, was Andrea Jenkins, who we had on the programme recently as well. She said in an interview that she was offered money when she was an MP to defect to Reform, and that Lee Anderson was on record saying the same thing. Is that true? Did someone offer money to defect to Reform?
I've no idea, but the person that was suggested is not a member of Reform. Doesn't donate to Reform, is not involved in Reform. Lots of people say all sorts of stuff, but they don't speak for Reform. Lots of people might like to speak for Reform. So, no, and likewise, you know, the Lee thing was actually... it was clarified in the Sunday Times, who basically got it wrong. They ran a story, they got it wrong, it was clarified, and they had to basically admit that. It was before Ben was even involved with the Reform, back in 2022. Look, it's the whole thing is a complete load of nonsense.
The other thing that I do want to talk to you about as well is James McMurdoch, your MP for South Basildon and East Surrey. Now, he, of course, was jailed for assault when he was 19, and I know that Nigel Farage has come out to say that look, the vetting wasn't what it should be, right? But, you know, if you're here, you're saying you want to be taken seriously as a political party, then this is the kind of thing that matters, right? Because court documents obtained by the Times have recently shown he was jailed for kicking his girlfriend around 4 times, according to those court documents.
That I don't think is an accurate representation of what the documents do say, point number one. Point number two, we are a great Christian nation. Are you seriously saying that if someone makes a bad mistake in life, age 19, that there's no redemption, they are doomed as a sinner forever? No. The whole point of Christianity is a sense of, if you've done something wrong, you pay your price, and at the end of that sentence, whatever it is, then, in a sense, you've done your bit. You've served your punishment, whatever it is, and good luck. And isn't it actually the alternative, the opposite is true? Isn't it remarkable that an individual had a bad issue at a very young age, but has gone full circle? And doesn't it show, actually, to other young people, look, bad stuff can happen. You can make bad judgments. You can get things badly wrong. But many years later, actually, you can do really well. He had a great job and end up as a member of Parliament. I think that's a good thing.
OK, I absolutely understand the point you're making about redemption, right? People shouldn't be written off for life. But his statement before the Times piece said, "We argued and I pushed her. She fell over and she was hurt." The court documents seen by the Times said that he kicked her. I mean, you can talk about redemption, but surely part of redemption is acknowledging what you did, being upfront about what you did, and only then can you move on and be truly sorry, right? I mean, it sounds like there is a pretty major discrepancy.
You can have a dispute about what actually happened. The bottom line is...
What's he tell... No, look, this is so important, OK? So what has James McMurdoch told you that happened?
Look, my understanding is different to what the Times have reported.
So what is your understanding?
It actually doesn't matter.
I wasn't there.
No, I'll tell you why it doesn't, because it comes back. The law is the law. The law ruled that he had transgressed, and he was punished, he served his punishment, and...
But if you're asking people to vote for you, people have the right to know what you've done in the past,
but equally,
what you've been
hang on.
jailed for,
So what you're really saying is, what you're suggesting is, well, if you did one thing, then you're a sinner for life.
Can I just say, it's really important. That's absolutely not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying that if people are voting for an MP, they have a right to know.
Correct. And we also have
that's right, isn't it?
But we also have a right.
So you do accept that? There's a transparency and a truth, and then people can make up their own minds in democracy.
The transparency is we have a right to a difference of opinion, OK? And one individual's opinion as to what happened, OK, who was there, by the way.
So
the Times were not there, the court documents were not there. So can I suggest that actually the individual might be closer to the truth because he was there?
What's he told you happened?
I'm not going to go into individuals. What I'm going to say is, at the end of the day, people made a decision in the courts. He served the punishment that he was given.
For what? What did he do?
And look, we live in a Christian nation, and we believe in redemption. You've done your bit. You've done your sentence, and you move on. And I think that's a great thing.
What did he do?
Look, at the end of the day...
Because I don't know what he's supposed to be redeemed for at the minute. What did he do?
Well, look, the court made a decision. We rely on the court judgment, right? And you can have different opinions as to what... Look, if he agrees or disagrees with that, that's one thing. At the end of the day, the court ruled, the court made a decision, and he served his time, and now he's had a great career, and I think that's a really positive sign. where you can say to someone, if you do something stupid, you do something bad, you make a terrible mistake, but actually you can come back from it. And that, I think, is a really constructive, optimistic thing.
If it's a good thing, why don't you just say what he's done?
Because I wasn't there on the night and there's a disagreement about it.
Must have told you something, though. Yeah. I mean, you're serving in Parliament with him,
so I'm
right?
on his side. I disagree with what else is saying.
So you don't think he kicked her, then? Is that what you're saying?
I'm trusting James. He's bang on the money. And I think that what he says is right. He was there. The court wasn't there. The Times weren't there.
Well, the victim was there as well, right?
Yeah, and they're going to have a disagreement. But at the end of the day, the law is the law. The law made a determination. Do you trust the law, right, or do you trust the Times 20 years later?
Well, the law said he was guilty.
The law, exactly, OK? Right, so the law said he was guilty, they served a sentence, and he's done his time, and he's moved on, and he's been incredibly successful, and I'm very proud of that.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the programme. Thank you. Well, of course, we are going to be talking an awful lot on the programme about South Korea and the situation there. South Korea's president says he will lift martial law. This is breaking news now. South Korean president saying he will lift martial law after parliamentary vote to block it. The president says the cabinet meeting will be held as soon as possible. So some breaking news to bring you now. The South Korean president saying he will lift martial law. Right, let's talk to our correspondent Dominic Waghorn. Dominic, what's happened?
Yeah, well, this looks like, and I'm not quite sure what the source is, but it seems to be a wire agency snap, so it'll be reliable that President Yoon, who announced the imposition of martial law in a late-night bombshell announcement in South Korea a few hours ago, is now saying that he will lift martial law. So going back on what he did after the parliamentary vote to block it. So he announced, stunning everybody, that martial law will be imposed in South Korea for the first time since the early 80s. That led to absolute crisis, chaos around the parliament, South Koreans racing to the scene to try and surround it and protect it from the security forces they're expected to move in to impose martial law. Some reports of soldiers trying to get into the building. Some key parliamentarians, including the Speaker, unable to get in, having to climb a wall to get in. And then a very tense standoff, it seems, between protesters and those security forces who are in combat gear, or certainly in khakis. But the MPs were able to get into the building and they were able to reach a consensus and voted to overturn that imposition of martial law. Now, under the South Korean constitution, that should have been it, and they made that clear. Opposition leaders came and spoke to the cameras and they said anybody who imposes martial law after that vote would be breaking the law. But the Defence Ministry, crucially, said that it would wait to see what the president did, and until he suspended martial law, they would continue maintaining it. So there was a period of real uncertainty and I think a rather febrile atmosphere, particularly around the Parliament. Grave concern expressed by the US State Department and by the British government as well about their nationals there, but also about the situation. South Korea is such a key regional ally for the West, a bulwark of democracy and stability in the region. And it looks now as though the crisis has been diffused if the president has done what he's reported to have done, which is to say, yes, he agrees that now the Parliament has voted to overturn what he did earlier, he will suspend martial law. There's going to be a cabinet meeting, which we expect will then lead to martial law being lifted. So I guess the expectation then is the crisis is diffused. There's no reason for the security forces to stay out on the streets, which they have. And what we're seeing here is they're moving, and we think, to sort of maintain law and order, not to impose any kind of martial authority. But there was tense scenes as they were dealing with protesters who were very angry, very worried about what was going on. So the expectation, I suppose, is that they will disperse from the scene once the crowds of protesters will do so as well, and you'd expect them to do so if they feel that the crisis has indeed passed and the threat to democracy has passed as well.
Dominic, thank you. Just to recap, the president of South Korea saying that he will lift martial law. He's also said that the martial law command forces have withdrawn. So the South Korean president saying he will now lift martial law and withdrawing martial law command. Dominic, just talk to me a bit about the president. You said earlier that it was a bit of a kind of last roll of the dice from him.
Yeah, I think that's the interpretation of many observers, is that what he said in his announcement, which did take everyone by surprise, was he was imposing martial law because of a number of reasons. The political attacks on him, what he believed were the unacceptable actions of his political rivals. But he also said that there was a kind of anti-state conspiracy involving North Korean elements in South Korean society. Now, that surprised people, but it is sort of the kind of language that previous South Koreans politicians have used to dress up what they've said to kind of whip up popular support. There was absolutely no evidence at all that we can see of North Koreans getting involved in South Korean politics. And what we assume he was more worried about was, in reality, the fact that he's a lame-duck president. So he was a member of the majority party. That his party lost that majority. The Democratic Party, his arch rivals, won the majority. So the ruling party in Parliament is his political rivals, and they were acting to attack him politically. And he is beleaguered because he's at the centre, and his wife and a number of other aides, of a number of influence peddling, corruption scandals. So he was running out of options. His popularity ratings were below 20%. And so this has been seen, I think, by many as a kind of last roll of the dice. Pretty desperate one. He does have the right to impose martial law, but only in special circumstances. And South Koreans are proudly, very, very fiercely proud of their democracy, and therefore they saw this as, many of them, as a real threat to that. And so they raced to the scene and tried to protect the Parliament and the MPs there. So, what appears to have been a kind of political crisis then turned into possibly an attempted coup, and then into a constitutional crisis. And the hope, of course, for South Koreans and also for their allies is that the moment that the threat is now past. And I suppose the question now is, is it a lingering stain? Does it weaken South Korea? Or when you see coups so quickly overturned by the power of the people, by democracy, arguably that strengthens democracy and actually makes South Korea even more of a beacon of democracy in the region.
When you see people refusing to leave the parliament to, effectively asserting the right of that parliamentary, democracy.
Yeah, and what's so crucial, yeah, exactly. And North Korea, to the north of South Korea, obviously they fought a war in the 50s where the Chinese and the Russians came in on the side of the North Koreans, and America, Britain and the UN on the side of the South Koreans. That's left the North Koreans as kind of isolated pariah state, but an increasingly powerful one, particularly now that it's formed and strengthened its alliance with Russia, who need someone to sell their oil to. They need someone to make artillery shells for their war in Ukraine. And now the South Koreans are sending thousands of their soldiers to Ukraine as well. And that's kind of, I think, raised tensions on the peninsula because it's raised concerns about a particularly more and more belligerent North Korea getting more and more involved elsewhere in the world. That's caused concern. So all of that, I think, made this even more worrying. And the fear was those kind of tensions could have exacerbated a volatile situation, which we hope now will be able to ease in the wake of what appears to be the president backing down.
Thank you very much indeed, Dominic Waghorn, there bringing us right up to date with the latest in South Korea. Well, before this latest news that the South Korean president says he's going to lift martial law, we did hear earlier from South Korea's main opposition leader, who said that vote in Parliament means that the armed forces would be breaking the law if they tried to enforce the president's order.
The declaration of martial law was unconstitutional and void from the beginning, but this has been further confirmed by the recent resolution of the National Assembly. All presidential orders based on the declaration of martial law are unconstitutional, void and illegal. To the soldiers of the Republic of Korea, from now on, the president's order following the illegal declaration of martial law is clearly illegal and unconstitutional. Following the unconstitutional, invalid and illegal presidential order is itself an unlawful act.
Just to recap the breaking news we're hearing in the last few minutes, South Korea's president has said he will lift martial law after the parliamentary vote to block it. He's also said that his cabinet will hold a meeting as soon as possible and confirmed that the martial law command forces have been withdrawn. We've been getting reaction from the United States, of course, a key ally of South Korea. Our international correspondent, Dagmar Magne, joins us now from Washington. There must be some relief.
Well, I expect so. I mean, this news is so recent that we haven't had anything official yet. But we have had statements before where State Department officials, the White House, have all expressed their grave concerns about the situation. And we know that there have been contacts made to South Korean counterparts over the last few hours, trying to find out what was going on. And I imagine trying to encourage them to resolve this situation in accordance with the law, which seems to be what President Yoon, after a very febrile few hours, has decided to do, to follow the constitution, which would have required him to accept the vote in the parliament, which was voted on, by the way, by every parliamentarian who attended, that this declaration of martial law should be rescinded. We know that the Pentagon was in touch with the armed forces in South Korea. You know, those two armies work side by side very, very closely on the South Korean peninsula. You have 24,000 US troops there. You have Camp Humphreys, which is the biggest US military base outside of the United States. And they work in combined divisions. And I think this martial law declaration will have put a very democratically infused army into a very difficult situation as to whether they should follow what the president had said or whether they should follow what the parliament said. You know, they're not an army, the South Koreans, who particularly want to follow any kind of authoritarian-seeming notes from the leader. And the last time we saw a declaration of martial law like this was in the end of the 1979, 1980s, when you did have a spate of authoritarian leaders there. So I imagine the United States will be breathing a sigh of relief that this has happened. We heard just now from the main opposition leader in South Korea, and I think what's interesting there is also that he said in a statement earlier that he hoped that this would be a decisive turning point for the country away from what he called a state of repeated regression. And he holds the majority in the parliament. You know, as we were hearing from Dominic, the president himself is clearly feeling very beleaguered, which is why he called this extraordinary state of martial law for these few hours, but clearly buckled under pressure. And that was presumably pressure from the people of South Korea who came to the streets outside the parliament in outrage at this declaration, from his own parliamentarians, and I would imagine from allies across the world, including especially from counterparts in the United States who we know were on the phone and trying to put pressure on the president to resolve this situation peacefully, which it does appear has now happened. We'll have to see whether this is a turning point and what happens next politically.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Diana Magadey talking to us there from Washington. Well, we've had a little bit more detail, I should say, from our colleagues at NBC on the president of South Korea and what he's had to say recently. He said in a statement, we understand, "I've accepted the decision made by the National Assembly to dissolve and lift the martial law." That, a quote, apparently from an address to the nation on television broadcast nationwide on Wednesday, early in the morning in South Korea. So that confirmation that the South Korean president saying he will lift martial law. Let's bring in Tan Desi, the Labour chair of the Commons Defence Select Committee. Great to have you here. It's a rapidly moving story, clearly, that I'm sure that you're trying to kind of wrap your head around as much as all of us. The latest news seems to be that the president is back down. He said that he is going to lift martial law. How much of a sigh of relief will that be?
I think it will be a huge sigh of relief. It was a fast-moving situation, and it was also something of great concern because South Korea is a close ally of ours. And I think the president's move took everybody by surprise, not just us here in the UK. I know US is an even closer ally, and they intimated that they had no knowledge of this declaration of martial law. And more importantly, I think it took the South Korean people by surprise. Parliament voted against it. His own party then asked him to retract. And I'm glad that it seems to have calmed down. And that is very, very important for us because at the present time, when we see North Korean troops in our continent, it is very important that our partners in South Korea, their democracy is strong.
Yeah, that's interesting, the point you make there, because obviously it's a key ally, as you say, of the UK, but also the West in general. Is it particularly important at this time, as you say, when North Korean forces, we know, are supporting Russia in the war against Ukraine?
Well, Sophie, look, it's the first time that we've had thousands of North Korean troops on European soil, so it is very concerning. But at the same time, I think it's a testament to the democracy in South Korea that it was resolved so quickly. So let's hope that things do calm down and we'll see.
Yeah, you say it's a testament to the democracy. I guess, is there some positives to be taken about the fact that, the Parliament just didn't accept it? They stayed in, they said, no, we're not doing this.
And definitely, and we saw that the people come very, very swiftly outside Parliament. I think that is a sign of a strong democracy, and long may that continue.
You talked there about North Korea's involvement in the war in Ukraine. That's originally, of course, what you came on this programme to talk to us about, which I think just shows how fast-moving international affairs are at the moment. Do you think we need to be stepping up support for Ukraine? And if we do we need to start putting a date on when we're going to start spending 2.5% of GDP on defence?
Look, I'm very, very glad that the government is extending its support, so that there's not only is there an annual package, but we've also now signed that industrial pact in terms of production of the weaponry for Ukraine. We've also now seen support from many of our other NATO allies, including Sweden, which has said that in terms of ramping up the domestic production. So there is a lot of support there. In terms of the 2.5%, I am on record, I've said that on the floor of the House, that in an increasingly dangerous and volatile world, we need to make sure that there is a clear timeline, a clear timetable for how we are going to reach that 2.5% figure. I know that many parliamentarians across the House would share that opinion. The government has intimated that they will be reaching that 2.5% after the Strategic Defence Review has been conducted. It was good that the Defence Committee today, by the way, had Lord Robertson and General Sir Richard Barrons giving public evidence. So that is, I think, a similar theme that has been running through this whole debate, and that came through today as well. But we need to make sure that there is clarity, not just for our NATO allies, but also for the domestic defence community.
I'm just interested because we're talking about NATO allies there, and it feels like for the first time the debate is shifting slightly on Ukraine to how the war may at some point be brought to a close and the kind of ugly compromise that is needed. President Zelensky has been very clear that he wants a security guarantee. Yeah. Ideally, he wants membership of NATO. Do you think that's something that's seriously on the table?
Well, Sophie, first of all, I want to commend Sky News on that excellent piece of journalism, exclusive in the sense that we saw, if we look at what had just happened last year, President Zelensky said, no way am I coming to the negotiating table with President Putin. He has made an illegal invasion on our territory. But now, I think that's an opening salvo from President Zelensky, wherein he has said that, in essence, two parts to it. Firstly, to, in essence, freeze the conflict as we see it at the moment. So temporarily ceding territory in terms of Donbass and Crimea for it to be negotiated at a future date. But also how he has intimated that he would like that permanent NATO membership.
Can I be honest on that demand on NATO? Because, NATO is a nuclear alliance, right? And Russia is a nuclear power.
Yeah.
And the kind of founding principle of NATO is that if one member of NATO is attacked, then all of NATO is attacked.
Yes.
So are we seriously saying that if NATO membership for Ukraine is on the table, that we would be prepared to go to war with Russia? Because I just don't believe. I don't believe that is true.
Sophie, look, you are alluding to Article 5, and I think in terms of Ukraine's membership, already what the NATO allies have agreed, in terms of as a public statement, is that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO membership. However, the allies are not agreed on giving Ukraine that membership at the present time, because there is a conflict, there's an ongoing conflict there. And I think in terms of the incoming Trump administration, with President-elect Trump, he has chosen General Keith Kellogg as his special envoy for Ukraine and Russia. And I think it's very telling that his paper back in April was the fact that he did not want an immediate membership for Ukraine of NATO. In fact, he said that that should be halted indefinitely until the situation is resolved. And he instead wanted that there is a bilateral strategic security structure in place. So I think we can see where the US is going. And I think in terms of the wider NATO allies, we will also have issues with many of our allies on the eastern flank, because while that conflict is raging, even if it is temporarily halted, I personally can't see that situation whereby that NATO membership is given. But then at the same time, it should be noted that President Putin himself has been expressing platitudes and praise onto President-elect Trump. So that's obviously the sign of somebody who wants peace rather than to continue with war.
It's interesting. Thank you very much for being on the programme. I'm sure there'll be lots of other occasions for us to talk about these issues in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I do just want to remind you of tonight's breaking news, because South Korea's president has said he is going to lift martial law after a parliamentary vote to block it. He said his cabinet will hold a meeting as soon as possible. He also confirmed martial law command forces had been withdrawn. Now, we're hearing that he's made the comments during an address to the nation. We can speak now to Dr. Chris Deacon, who is a member of the Centre for Korean Studies at SOAS. So thank you very much for being with us on the programme, giving us your expertise on this extremely fast-moving situation tonight. So do you think that that's it? It's going to be peace from now?
I mean, we obviously have to see. I think Yoon has clearly isolated himself politically by doing this. As we've seen yesterday, South Korean time, it's not just been the main opposition party in South Korea that has come out against Yoon's decision to declare martial law. It was also the opposition, his own party. And as we heard earlier in your reporting, all members of the National Assembly that made it into the National Assembly past the sort of police barricades and the like that they had to get through to vote this down. All 190 of them did so. So there seemed to be pretty cross-party support against this. So there is the potential now, even though martial law is being lifted, we hear, that this might not be the end of the situation for Yoon himself. I mean, it's understood that one of the reasons that he probably did this is to try and stave off the constant attacks that he is receiving from the opposition party, who have the majority power within the National Assembly. And that's included trying to impeach members of his cabinet, trying to investigate him and his wife due to corruption allegations, and potentially even try and impeach Yoon himself. Now, it may be that even though he was trying to stave off those attacks, perhaps what he's done here will actually hasten that process further. South Korea is not averse to impeaching its presidents, putting them on trial, and indeed jailing them. Only 2 presidents ago, Park Geun-hye, that was her fate, and the same has happened to others. So we can't be sure, but given the political isolation that Yoon seems to find himself in, it seems a definite possibility.
OK, can you let me know as well, if you can, how much of a shock has this been? It feels like it came from nowhere, but I'm sure closer observers of South Korea may not agree with that assessment. What do you think?
No, it certainly was a shock. I mean, to both observers of South Korea and seemingly to South Koreans themselves, from what I've seen and heard today. There was no expectation of this. I mean, that said, certainly progressives in South Korea have been warning against the possibility of this happening. Those accusations weren't necessarily taken entirely seriously. And if we look back at that previous president, Park Geun-hye, who was impeached only 7 or 8 years ago, it latterly came out in the investigations that took place that she herself had potential plans to try to declare martial law to get herself out of the sort of sticky political situation that she found herself in.
I'm going to have to break off because we are going to go live to Seoul, but just to say thank you so much for being on the programme and giving us your expertise. We really appreciate it tonight. Well, I do just want to take you to South Korea, where we've seen these dramatic scenes unfolding this evening. We are joined by Young Hoon, who I believe is one of the protesters outside the Parliament in Seoul. If you can hear me, how do you feel now that you've heard the news that martial law has been lifted?
All right, so the martial law is basically the suppression of the freedom of speech, right? And I do believe it's very nonsense, right? All these people, a bunch of people, can you see them?
Yeah, we can see them.
So the people, all right, they gathered in front of the National Assembly's building, claiming that president is the fraud and the suppressor of the freedom of speech, right? And I think it's crazy. It's being really nonsense, right?
Does it make you feel quite proud of your country? You're showing us all those people there gathered outside the parliament. Do you think it makes you feel quite proud of the strength of democracy in South Korea that it got this reaction?
I'm really sorry about this. Like, it's really crowded and noisy here. So could you please speak like slowly and properly? Like, sorry.
Of course. I apologise. Does it make you feel proud? Does it make you feel proud of your democracy to see the strength of the people?
Yeah, I am very proud of these people, right? So South Korea is one of the most democratic country in whole Asia. Because what makes us very democratic country is that this freedom of speech, right? I'm really proud of them.
Thank you so much for being with us this evening. It's been great to have you on the show and to see those kind of live scenes from Seoul outside the Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, it has been a pretty extraordinary politics hub this evening, I have to say, with that fast-developing story in South Korea. I thought we'd just take a pause for a moment of reflection with Sky's lead World News presenter, Yalda Hakim, who's here with us. Of course, you're going to be covering this on your programme at 9 p.m. But what's your assessment, Yalda? Where are we right now?
I mean, it's quite extraordinary, Sophie. For the last few hours, we've heard words like shocking, surprising, dramatic. This has felt like it's come from nowhere. I mean, one of the West's most important allies, South Korea, is considered part of the West. It has almost 30,000 US troops stationed there. So no doubt tonight, when we saw this very shocking imposition of martial law by the president, which was probably the shortest implementation of martial law, lasted about 2.5 hours. Really quite extraordinary. I know you've got about 15 seconds to go, but we're going to cover it on our show.
Honestly, it's been such a full show. There's so much to say. It's been great to have you on, Yalda, and more from Yalda, of course, at 9 o'clock.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.